Jeff was concealing a horrible secret as the world witnessed a Hollywood legend. Before scenes, he experienced panic attacks. To get away from his father, he hid in garages. His heart rate reaches 148 when filming, even at 75, which is greater than it was throughout cancer treatment. He recently spoke up at a significant awards presentation. Everyone was taken aback by what he disclosed. The admission clarifies why fame never felt right for him and why he came close to quitting performing several times. The birth date of Jeffrey Leon Bridges is December 4th, 1949. Jeff's early years were filled with movie lights and set noise rather than gentle lullabies and baby blankets because his parents were performers. His parents took him on a movie set when he was just 6 months old. The Company She Keeps was the title of the film, which was released in January 1951. For one scene, the director required a real sobbing infant. Thus, Jane Greer pinched infant Jeff, and his cry came at the perfect moment. It was the ideal scene. His name wasn't even on the studio record. All they called him was Crying Baby. Later in life, Jeff made a joke about how his first income most likely went directly into baby milk and diapers. Unbeknownst to him, however, his Hollywood career had already started before he could speak. Jeff's father, Lloyd Bridges, had conflicting opinions about show business as he grew older. Despite his fame, particularly from the movie High Noon, he had doubts about Hollywood. He sat Jeff and his older brother, Bao, down in 1957 or 1958 and told them something unexpected. The majority of actors, he noted, earned less than $5,000 annually. To show it, he even had printed numbers. He advised them to concentrate on their studies, no playing roles until they received grades above a B+. He went so far as to advise them to consider becoming engineers rather than performers. For years, the restriction persisted in the home, which caused Jeff to reconsider his desire for celebrity. There was a subliminal worry that perhaps the acting wasn't steady enough. Something changed when Jeff was 13 years old. He did not wish to be only recognized as Lloyd's son. Thus, in 1963, he scribbled "not an actor" on his bedroom door using a marker. He began painting at Brentwood Art Center, and on August 9, 1964, he sold a canvas for $35. In addition, he formed the Nozzles, a surf rock band, and performed at Santa Monica fairs. While Jeff was learning brushstrokes and guitar chords, his older brother Bao was studying acting scripts. He still has his 1966 high school art trophies in his studio. For Jeff, this was a message rather than merely a phase. Just because a path was simple didn't mean he wanted to take it. He desired to look for something genuine on his own. However, Los Angeles' 1960s were more than just a time for music and art. Drugs and parties were present. Jeff started using marijuana before math class when he was 16 years old. He experimented with LSD at jam sessions in Topanga Canyon during the summer of 1967. On September 3rd, he was stopped by police one evening. His Volkswagen Beetle has a roach in it. Instead of detaining him since he was a minor, they called his father, which alarmed the family. His mother, Dorothy Bridges, forced him to begin weekly therapy. That October, Lloyd personally took him to 2 Malibu rehab meetings. Later, Jeff remarked that he felt as though he was going to miss life's off-ramp. It served as the initial major wake-up call. Lloyd experimented since lectures weren't working. He made a witty remark during breakfast one morning in early 1968. "Acting could be a way to do everything," he informed Jeff. "You can paint, fly aircraft, and perform music without having to join a band or the military. Infinite lives, one job." That thought stayed with Jeff. It gave the impression that acting was a freedom rather than a trap. Jeff quickly accepted a modest playing part on Sea Hunt, his father's show. He did it in part so that he could get a new Stratocaster guitar. Lloyd's tactic had been successful. Jeff was in, but he was forever changed by the promise of acting as free. Nevertheless, he took his time getting a full-time job in Hollywood. At the age of 17, Jeff entered a military office on May 12, 1967, and enlisted in the Coast Guard Reserve. The 8-year commitment was made. In addition to keeping him out of the Vietnam War, it hindered his filmmaking. He pulled midnight shifts and cleaned rust-off boys on the weekends. Later on, he claimed it was torture. Nevertheless, he had enough time in the schedule to act during breaks. At that time, he shot Thunderbolt and Lightfoot in 1974 and The Last Picture Show in 1971. He received nominated for both Oscars. At the same time, he pursued accolades while wearing his uniform. He eventually quit the Coast Guard in 1975. By coincidence, America abolished the draft in that same year. Jeff had also traveled to New York to study at Herbert Berghoff's studio in 1967 on a Greyhound bus. Jeff wasn't a big fan of the school's notoriously demanding acting classes. The street art and music clubs thrilled him more. He carried his panoramic camera and spent time conversing with painters and musicians while taking pictures in the subways. He sneaked into open mic nights at Café Wa by skipping practices. Even though he was only there for a few months before going back home, he had a line he could use to answer his parents' questions about if he was serious about acting. Jeff nearly left even after being nominated for an Oscar. In order to create music and paint coastal sceneries, he hired a studio in Venice and purchased a beach house in Malibu in 1972. No gallery objective, no record deal. All he wanted was a break and some space. He hinted to his father that he might not see the upcoming films. Then all of a sudden, fantastic roles began to appear. It wasn't a long break. By 1973, the entire family was concerned about his suggestion of quitting. They gathered in their living room in Holmby Hills. The family's constant center, Dorothy, took out a notebook and kept track of all Jeff's job applications and auditions. Jeff was reminded by Lloyd that acting allowed him to employ all of his skills simultaneously. Dorothy went on to say that they needed Jeff to continue rowing with them and that everyone supported one another. Jeff accepted a part in The Iceman Cometh a few days later, a movie he had previously attempted to reject. To persuade him, the director even went to his art studio. He was thrust back into the spotlight by that little push. In the summer of 1975, Paradise Valley, Montana was the scene. At the age of 25, Jeff Bridges started working on Rancho Deluxe, an odd little comedy. He noticed a woman strolling through the Chico Hot Springs Hotel's dining room one afternoon when he looked up. Jeff couldn't take his eyes off her, even though she had 2 black eyes and a recently set nose. His lines were slipping his mind. Every time he botched a take, the team made a joke about it. He approached her and invited her to supper in between shoots. Susan Geston, an economics student who worked there to make some cash, said no. "No, maybe I'll see you around," she said to him. "It's a small town." He remembered that moment. They danced together at the wrap party 3 nights later. It was lovely, but awkward. They refused to let go. They went to look for ranches near the river the following morning. A picture from that day is still in Jeff's wallet. He claims that it transports him back to the moment he realized he had discovered the one. He was chosen by Paramount to play Jack Prescott in the King Kong remake in 1976. At the time, it was the most expensive film ever produced, with a $24 million budget. The promotion cost more than $8 million. If it made more than $60 million globally, they guaranteed enormous bonuses. No one thought it would, yet the largest December opening in history took place over the first weekend, bringing in $7,023,921 from 974 cinemas. It made more than $26 million in just 10 days. It reached almost $90 million at the end. There was a cost to that achievement. For over 2 years, Jeff was confined to contract negotiations, advertising, and interviews. He once made a joke about how the enormous ape wouldn't release go of his bank account after grabbing it instead of a girl. Then came 1977. Susan had supported him over the whole ordeal. She said, "With or without you, I'm going to have kids and establish roots." After glancing at him one day, he was deeply affected by that. Monday was the day. By Wednesday, he was pacing their Malibu bungalow, contemplating whether he would have to give up his independence in order to settle down. In tears, he even called his brother Bo. He took Susan to a windy Zuma beach on Thursday. He proposed after taking a turquoise ring out of his pants. On June 5, 1977, 5 days later, they were married. She married her Lutheran pastor in a backyard at a simple ceremony. According to Jeff, her comment saved his life since he might have continued to float aimlessly until everything collapsed. He didn't drift, though. He recalled the feelings he had in Paradise Valley. He and Susan had visited an ancient farmhouse close to the Yellowstone River the morning following their first dance. "Don't let this place or this woman escape," Jeff claimed a voice instructed him. He purchased 320 acres west of Livingston in 1979. In order to prevent studios from reaching him, he constructed a basic timber cabin without a phone. He acknowledged missing auditions to paint and fish in a 1977 New York Times profile. It was referred to as career suicide by his agent. Jeff purposefully demanded exorbitant prices in the hopes that studios would back off. Rather, they continued to send offers. "That cabin became my way of breathing," he added. He would go to Montana when the noise level in Hollywood became too high. For weeks he would sit by the river, fix fences, and then vanish. Family still had a powerful pull. Lloyd Bridges, his father, had more than 150 credits. He once claimed to a reporter that he never put pressure on his kids, but he referred to Jeff's refusal of major parts as a waste of ability. That was painful. Jeff claimed that because his father had always been there for him, it hurt. Jeff was on the verge of being famous if he would just commit, according to trade publications like Variety. Jeff therefore agreed with himself he would play important parts. However, only if he could return to Montana in the interim. In 1981, Cutter's Way was one such role. He claimed that it allowed him to show his father that, while performing was important to him, it wasn't more important than peace. In 1981, Tron followed. He stood in front of an incomprehensible object at the age of 31. Even though the film only included digital effects for 15 to 20 minutes, it gave the impression that the future had come. Not even the animators at Disney wanted to touch it. They feared that their occupations will be replaced by computers. Because they believed that employing computers was cheating, the Academy declined to nominate it for visual effects. Jeff felt anxious. He even asked the director if computers could take the place of actors during rehearsals. His tense, anxious face, which you see in the film, wasn't an act. He was frightened. Later, he joked that whenever he saw a computer screen, Tron forced him to glance over his shoulder. In 1984, things became more complex. He had to portray an alien who was learning to move like a human for Starman. He got rid of all his bad habits. No slouching, no leaning, and no involuntary blinking. He spent 115 days gradually becoming more human on screen by studying a dancer to perfect the movements. It was praised by critics. He was nominated for an Oscar. However, he didn't feel like himself after that. To help him remember who he was, he scheduled therapy. For nearly a year, he traveled to Santa Monica once a week in an attempt to reconnect with the real Jeff. He and Glenn Close filmed Jagged Edge in 1985. Everyone was talking about the beach house scene in the sultry movie. The photos were published by the tabloids. Susan wasn't overjoyed. Jeff flirted on set for 10 years, but this one went too far. "One more part like that and I'm done," she informed him. Dinners became tense, according to friends. She didn't think the jokes offered by others hilarious. Later, Jeff claimed that the movie nearly caused a rift in the family. Their marriage was put to the test by more than just movies. Jeff spent a lot of time by himself on the set of Against All Odds in Mexico in 1983 and 1984. Reporters began drawing comparisons between him and Robert Redford and Paul Newman. He was affected by the pressure. He eventually acknowledged that he was drinking excessively at the time in 2011, late nights, tequila, and heat. During an interview, a magazine journalist even witnessed him throw up. According to Jeff, that was the point at which drinking ceased to be enjoyable. It began to dictate his timetable. The Fabulous Baker Boys followed. Casting for the film began in early 1988. In the hopes that he could transition to live music if things didn't work out, Jeff requested time to learn jazz piano. At 5 a.m., he awoke for instruction. He imitated Evans. Even miming to soundtracks was something he practiced. He put in a lot of effort at work. However, the film was released on October 13, 1989, and it became an immediate hit. 2 nominations for Oscars. excellent reviews. It was adored by all. The movie kept him even more enmeshed in the Hollywood environment rather than providing him with a way out. The piano was his escape strategy, Jeff later chuckled, but it backfired one chord at a time. On the set of The Fisher King in the summer of 1990, Jeff Bridges was positioned across from Robin Williams. Robin was blazing as she improvised, sometimes for 20 consecutive takes. Jeff had no idea what would happen next. Robin went on a furious 3-minute tirade about medieval knights one evening in the midst of the Bowery. Jeff stopped. He was unable to locate his cue. He left the set at 2:15 a.m., located a payphone, and dialed his wife, Susan. He told her that he could require treatment because he felt so shaken. Later, studio records revealed that on July 27, 1990, the insurance covered one emergency session. It was the only time in Jeff's 60 years of acting that he ever charged treatment to a movie. The Big Lebowski debuted in theaters on March 6, 1998, 8 years later. At first, it didn't generate much revenue. However, midnight screenings were crowded by 2002. Fans screamed lyrics back at the screen. Jeff thought it was humorous. Then everything went odd. On April 20th, 2005, a parody religion named Judaism was born. Within 10 years, it had over 600,000 self-declared priests. At an event in LA in 2007, folks lined up asking Jeff to bless their white Russians. He later acknowledged the whole situation freaked him out. He claimed it was flattering, but some folks acted like he genuinely lived in that bathrobe. After 2008, he stopped going to Lebowski Fest. He stated strangers even tried to follow him inside toilets. They desired knowledge. When the DVD came out in 1999, his daughters weren't impressed. Isabel was 18, Jessica was 16, Haley was 14. Suddenly, their pals had the guy abide stickers all over their lockers. At supper on May 21, 1999, they presented Jeff a handwritten list. The title read, "Why It's Weird You're Famous." They informed him kids at school mocked them over his profanity. They begged him to have a conventional desk job like other dads. Jeff retained that note. Years later, in a 2014 interview, he revealed it proudly. He said his biggest critics were always at home. In 2000, he tried something fresh. He helped produce The Contender, a political drama. He desired more control over his own projects. But things didn't go as planned. DreamWorks bought the film and recut it. Gary Oldman and his producing partner were outraged. They said the new version stressed a Democrat message. Headlines followed. The budget was $20 million. It only made $17. $9 million. Jeff played the president, but spent most of the time evading political fire. He later said in interviews that the stress almost made acting no longer enjoyable. He discovered that making a political film can quickly exhaust you. Jeff nearly missed out on the Oscar-winning role in 2009. Bad Blake, a broken-down country singer, was the subject of Crazy Heart. At first, Jeff said no. He had had enough of portraying wounded men. For weeks, director Scott Cooper pleaded with him. Only after T-Bone Burnett joined the project did Jeff say yes. He consented to do it. If he could sing his own tunes, that is. The movie made $39.05 million, although it cost $7 million to make. It took home 40 major honors. Jeff claimed that he gets chills simply thinking about it. He was still troubled by the near miss. Everything changed with a grudging yes. Something clicked when he finally held that golden trophy at the 2010 Oscars. His late parents were praised. His voice broke. "Acting is a groovy profession," he said. There was no sense of a prepared speech in the word "Bendende." They were authentic. He jokingly said backstage that the guy wouldn't be erased by victory. He knew in his heart that it was true. That moment appeared to be joyful to most people, but it sounded like relief to those who knew him. He was finally at peace with everything after 40 years. The Coen brothers offered him the lead in True Grit later that year. Rooster Cogburn was the role they wanted him to play. Instead, Jeff said no 3 times. His thoughts kept returning to John Wayne. He was afraid of the part. The Coens assured everyone that they would not remake the 1969 movie. The book was being filmed. That made him change his mind. Everyone was taken aback when he revealed something after filming. He claimed that one of his worst life decisions had been to turn them down. The movie received 10 nominations for Oscars. His Darker Rooster was well received by critics. It demonstrated that even legendary people had self-doubt. However, there are instances when confronting a shadow results in something remarkable. Jeff had a dream in 1994. The Giver was the title of the film he hoped to produce. Additionally, he wanted Lloyd Bridges, his father, to take the lead. Studios didn't believe in him, so he purchased the rights that year. Jeff persisted despite their claims that teens wouldn't want to see a movie with a 60-year-old man as the protagonist. Jeff had matured into the part intended for his father by the time Harvey Weinstein ultimately consented to finance it in 2013. Waiting gave him just the right amount of wrinkles, he said with a smile. The Giver was published on August 15, 2014, after 7,319 days. During its first weekend of release, the film brought in $12.03 million. For Jeff, it was a new beginning as well as an ending, even though it wasn't a box office success. That script has been revised 18 times by him. It was finally finished after he collaborated with 4 different directors. His life, however, was more than just movies. When Jeff was just 34 years old in 1983, he began something very different. End Hunger Network is a non-profit organization. He labored discreetly to combat child hunger while being viewed as a movie star. He stated that over 17 million children in the United States go to bed hungry while he was speaking at the National Press Club in 2010. He referred to this labor as penance, constantly griping about Hollywood issues while kids went hungry. His group pushed 5 significant nutrition bills over the course of 40 years. He even created sleeping tapes and ambient music CDs in 2015 and donated the $80,000 it brought in to No Kid Hungry. He would remain behind to meet with lawmakers and discuss summer meal programs, even during the promotion of films like True Grit. At one point, he made fun of his Oscar-winning A Lousy Soup Spoon. However, Jeff was unprepared for what happened in October 2020, despite his modest battle for others. He only tweeted once that month at the age of 70. Follicle non-Hodgkin lymphoma, a form of blood cancer, was the diagnosis made for him. He had a 9 by 12-inch tumor in his belly. He believed that the stress from the pandemic was the cause of his months-long weight loss and fatigue. He immediately began chemotherapy. 6 rounds of antibody treatment were combined. To maintain his composure, he also meditated daily. The tumor only grew to 2 cm after 11 months. According to his physician, it was the size of a marble in August 2021. Jeff declared that he was in complete clinical remission a month later. He celebrated the first time since therapy started that he had gone a mile without using his oxygen tank. However, things worsened during treatment. Jeff contracted COVID in January 2021, midway through his 4th round of chemotherapy. His immunity was already compromised. Days later, his oxygen levels plummeted. After being sent to the intensive care unit in Santa Barbara, he spent 5 weeks there. He was only able to stand for 45 seconds at a time due to the damage to his lungs. He was gradually strengthened by nurses. Sitting first, then 5 feet of walking, and more. He lost most of his hair and 35 pounds. He may have been rescued by his prior COVID vaccination, according to doctors. He claimed that although cancer was easier than the virus, it made him appreciate how fleeting life is. Jeff requested 2 shoeboxes worth of letters from a nurse while he was confined to the COVID unit. They came from Dorothy, his mother. He read them by himself one evening and came upon something that startled him. In 1969, his parents' 58-year marriage came dangerously close to dissolution. Lloyd filed for an early divorce and left to make a Western. Jeff was unaware. The correspondence revealed rage, frustration, and ultimately a silent recovery that began with a single postcard. For the children, let's try again. By that time, Jeff and Susan had been married for 43 years. He always believed that his parents' love was ideal. He realized the truth now. When he began discussing money, appreciation, and anxiety more candidly with Susan. Those letters reset my compass, he added. However, even recovery has a price. Jeff's medical expenses totaled more than $3 million due to chemotherapy, intensive care unit treatment, and oxygen therapy. That was not what he had anticipated. He returned to work on The Old Man, an FX thriller that had begun production in early 2020 but had halted when COVID struck in order to maintain his union health insurance. After his cancer diagnosis, it stalled once more, costing the studio about $1.05 million. Jeff continued to require an oxygen concentrator when filming started in October 2021. He needed to take breaks after filming scenes for no more than 45 seconds at a time. Paradoxically, the set he had originally feared ended up being the source of funding for his recuperation. On June 16, 2022, The Old Man made its debut. His worn-out, genuine performance was hailed by critics. It was survival, not acting. Then April 29, 2024 arrived. Jeff accepted the 49th Chaplin Award while wearing a tuxedo on stage at Alice Tully Hall. However, rather than delivering a typical speech, he astounded everyone. "I never really wanted to be an actor," he stated. "People stopped." He described how, when his father asked him to practice as a teenager, he would get panic attacks. He even spent 2 hours hiding in the garage at one point in the hopes that his father would forget what had happened. "Acting is like donning someone else's skin," he wrote in his old journal, itchy and incorrect. There was silence in the room for 6 full seconds. Then there was tremendous prolonged applause. The worry still haunts him as he gets closer to 75. His heart rate reached 148 beats per minute in March 2025 while he was filming Tron Ares. That's more than it was during chemotherapy. At 4 a.m., he awakens, believing he will lose his acting skills on shoot days. "The fears are louder than the tumors ever were," he told reporters. He meant it too.